Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle on Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the year. Started a new tradition this year on New Year's Eve, started to make breakfast right at midnight. Tara, you know why?
Nope.
I want to make a New Year's toast.
Oh.
New Year's toast.
You were not at midnight.
I wasn't awake at midnight. That was a lie, y'all.
I'm not buying that for a minute.
I don't even pretend. Good morning. Welcome to a new year, 2024, where on Wednesdays, where Tara and I talk about everything to do with relationships and communication. And we're going to start off today, before we dive into our question, with a few questions for you all. I would love to hear from Sorrel. I see him here. Sorrel, I would love to hear, how are you and what are you grateful for today on the first Wednesday of 2024?
I am excited. I'm excited. That's how I am today, and that's how I say I am.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful for my 90-year-old parents who've been together for 65 years.
Wow, that's amazing. You say that a lot. I think that's amazing that you're that grateful for your parents. Thank you for bringing that, Sorrel. And the beautiful Andrea. Hi. I would love to know, where are you and who are you going to hug today?
Kathryn, I am where I need to be, which is right here. And hugging, as usual, first myself.
Love that. Yep.
You always first myself and then my daughters.
Yay, family time. Thank you. And Chase just popped on and said, Chase, I think it's the perfect time for you to tell us what time it is.
The time is right now. Don't ever forget that.
That's right. No matter where you are, what time it is on the clock, the time is now. And right now, we are going to start with our question, which is, what can you learn about yourself through your relationships? And Tara and I've had a lot of fun talking about this, talking about relationships that we've experienced over the holidays. And yeah, we want to take a deep dive into this. So Tara, what do you have to say? Where do you want to start us with this question?
Yeah, I want to dig into a little bit of the value of relationships, actually, before we, so we can really care about why this topic matters. But before I even do that, I want to make an announcement, and we'll announce this again, and it goes out partly as a thank you to the generosity of Chase. He has agreed to swap days with us. And so now health, wellness, and vitality starting next week will be on Wednesday mornings, and communication and relationships will be on Tuesday mornings. So this is our last Wednesday for relationships and communication, and we will be swapping with Chase. So a big, giant thank you for making that switch for us, Chase, because it is absolutely, and Kathryn worked on that too. It's really helping some conflicts that I had. So big thank you. And
amazing. We'll support you. I'm here for you. Whatever you need. I'm glad you're happy.
So grateful. Thank you. We have relationships right here at the Daily Huddle that I have really come to treasure over the years. But I want to share a little bit of research that I've done before we talk about what we can learn about ourselves from our relationships, because I want us to really just stop for a minute and take a breath about why relationships are so vital and why Kathryn and I particularly have devoted so much of our time and effort and passion to relationships. So I'm going to give you all some research. And I want to start with a study done by the Mental Health Foundation. And what's scary about this is this was done in 2016. So these stats have escalated partly due to the pandemic and the isolation that came out of the pandemic. But in 2016, the Mental Health Foundation discovered exactly this, that the absence of healthy relationships is killing us faster than obesity and lack of exercise combined. I'm going to give you one more really fascinating piece of research. And some of you all may be aware of the longest study ever done on happiness by Harvard. And that this study started in 1938. They pulled together over 700 men, because back then I forgot the reason why, but it was over 700 men, and they studied their lives. And today, the fourth director of this study is still going on at Harvard. It's about 85 years old now. And this is what they have discovered with the few men that are still left to tell their story about happiness, is that nothing has elevated happiness and relationships and longevity more than relationships. In the words of Dr. Robert Waldinger, who actually has written a book called The Good Life based on this study, he says this: the good life is built with good relationships. He can compare it to low cholesterol, low weight, better heart health. Relationships truly are not only the key to happiness, but the key to health. So that is why we want to really dive into what we can learn about relationships. And Kathryn and I started talking about this because I don't know about you all, but during the holidays, we're a lot more social. And a lot of that socialization is not necessarily with new people, but it's with family members we haven't seen in a long time. And we stopped and we took a breath and we kind of analyzed our communication with our relationships and how we might respond. And what we've discovered is that the way we respond in relationships, do we pull back? Do we have that tendency to be kind of passive aggressive when we don't get our way? Do we have a tendency to talk over people and run over things? Each one of these, as we analyze where we could strengthen our communication, each one of these empowers us to understand a little bit more about ourselves. So, Kathryn, before I continue on with my research, which I have much more to share, I want to hear from you as far as what maybe you've learned about yourself as a result of some of your relationships.
Well, the thing that keeps coming to me, Tara, is I can think of two people, but one in particular that I'm fairly close to, who has, due to trauma in her life, systematically started to eliminate a lot of the important relationships in her life or minimize contact with people. Mm-hmm. And watching the impact of that over the years has been really eye-opening about what does the mind do, what does the brain do when it isn't in relationship. Good. And when we say relationship, of course, you come into contact with people all the time. But I think I'm talking about the type of relationship where somebody looks at you and goes, "Are you sure? Is that right? You good?" Like really challenges us if there's something that we need to be challenged on, not the yes friend, not the, And I think for me, relationship keeps me honest. It keeps me wanting to be the best person that I can. And I can tell that it's healthy for me. Like you say, like exercise is healthy for my body. Relationships are healthy for my mind. And then of course, everything that goes with that, because when I get off and I start feeling funky, or I start going into my head or going down those dark holes, every time I finally figured this out, I can be a little hard-headed. Every time it's because I've not been calling the folks I normally call, I just have gotten busy or whatever. So I haven't been, that's how I process is through communication and relationship. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot to say. Just for me, the bottom line is those stats make perfect sense to me as to why it helps to make us healthier, lower our heart rate, blood pressure, et cetera. So I think it goes beyond probably what we're even aware of.
So I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to talk about the easy side of this first. Is like sometimes just leaning into deep relationships, like a phone call with you or a phone call with another treasured friend or a family member. Sometimes, I can physically feel that lifting my spirits and my energy. And because I've studied it so much, I know what the science behind it is. Mm-hmm. We had a gathering over the holidays, and I'm not kidding you. I told you this, that we brought together 25 authentic, passionate, badass women. Mm-hmm. And we were in a room for 3 or 4 hours together. And I literally feel like I lived off that energy for several days. Mm-hmm. So there is, beautiful, true health and happiness right there. But this is the other side of this coin. And here's where I want your help is, what about when there's conflict in a relationship? Mm-hmm. Because for me, that's where I have the opportunity to learn something about myself. When something doesn't feel right, and when I'm in a relationship with somebody that I truly treasure, I'm going to take the risk to approach it, to address it. I'm not sure I always get it right. And if I don't treasure the relationship, I'll probably just say screw it, and I'll just let it be, and it builds a wall between us. So help me to learn a little bit about how you navigate conflict in relationships, because I ask you this because I think you're masterful at it.
Oh, well, thank you. Of course, I don't know that that's true always, but I often think it starts with where we are. How resourced am I? How reactive am I? Am I getting triggered by this conflict? Because if something's happening and I'm feeling all those things, like I'm triggered or I'm really anxious, I have to be careful about going into a conversation about that at that point. So I think that's like step one is like, where am I and what's happening? Get clear.
Okay.
And then engage in that conversation with somebody. We always talk about this, and it's just, we can't say it enough, is what's my intention? Because often what I'll find, especially if I talk to somebody ahead of time to try and work this out, is I actually have a little bit of a nefarious is a little of a strong word, nefarious intention. Like I want to show them, I want to get my point across.
You want to win.
I want to win. I want to show them wrong. I want to let them know. Well, that's not going to, and I say, well, but I really want to be, in harmony afterwards, and somebody might say to me, well, you do realize those two don't go together,
Right.
Trying to get yours and get one in is not going to get you to a great place at the end. It'll get you that feeling for a moment, and then it's not going to feel great. So I think for me, I've got to work out a lot of my stuff before I go into the conversation. If there's conflict with a person, there's usually something I have to work out with that person that I can't do alone. So, the extreme of me often wants to work all of it out on my own, so I don't have to deal with it. Can't do that,
No.
But then the other extreme is I don't want to have to work any of my own stuff out first because this is their fault and I want to, you know what I mean? So it's that balance of I've got to take care of my side of the street, then show up in the relationship and work it out with the person. That's hard. I got to tell you, that is to be intentional and grounded and clear and vulnerable can be really difficult for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you're so open about that because I know you so well. I've seen you in both of those sides of the coin. I've seen you be really vulnerable, and then I've seen you like just all buttoned up and like, nope, I'm not going there. And sometimes when I'm in those places, I'm trying to teach myself to just say, I'm not in a place to talk about this right now. This is not a space where I want to be. It's just not my time. Because if I push myself to talk about something when I'm not in that place to do it, it will not end well. I've given this a lot of thought, though, and there's something that I've learned about myself, and I definitely would love to hear from others what they've learned as they analyze their relationships. And when I think that my communication with someone is not really clear and rich and safe and as beautiful as it can be, I'm doing something that you and I talk about all the time not to do, and I still do it. And that is to make assumptions. Like I might assume that someone's too busy to talk, or they were short and it's because they're mad at me. Or, the list goes on. And when I feel angst around relationships, it's because I've assumed something that may or may not be the case. And the insecure part of me doesn't want to ask. I don't want to come over sounding like, oh, are you mad? I can't stand that. So I don't want to come over in that tone. So I might sulk away with my assumptions and stew on something for quite a really long time.
Well, and I think what you're saying too, I think sometimes we want rules. We want, if this is happening, do this. If you're in conflict, you do A, B, and C. And it just isn't that simple. The reality is, for me, I find where do I need to stretch myself? If I'm feeling like it's super easy to go, sort of quiet and deal with this all myself, that tells me that to push myself, I really need to be in relationship with this person. It's like, and so we have to, when we first started talking about this topic, the first thing that came to me was know thyself. Because there's nothing that you and I could say that's going to be the magic fix for anyone every time. It's where are you? What's true for you? And how do you get to the real truth for yourself right now? And be honest with yourself and then go from there And you got to be willing to fail. Like, it's not going to be perfect every time, and you do your best.
Right. You're so right. I have a very close friend, and when she talks about issues in her relationship and her marriage, their psychiatrist, their psychologist has said, you process emotions really fast. Your husband does not. And so if she approaches something that's really uncomfortable and awkward, it'll be days of almost silence where he's working this out and he's trying to figure out his emotions around something. And she says that sometimes she doesn't even want to approach the topic at all because it feels like torture. And what she learned is it was not his intention. He's just working things out. Yeah. So I think that it's helpful if we learn a little bit more about what are the hurdles to really rich, healthy relationships. And one of the things that I did was there's a really world-renowned couple, Jonathan and Andrea Taylor Cummings, and they have been teaching. They're married and they're both doctors of psychology, and they've been teaching workshops in relationships and communication in big companies for almost 30 years now. And they cite 4 hurdles to the challenges in communication. And I would love to share those hurdles because I think we're dancing around those. One of those is unmet expectations. And that a lot of times I think we can think about that in a work setting, a friend setting, and in our significant other. When there are unmet expectations. The second one is, and this is where I can get stronger, especially with a friend like you that helps me, is poor conflict resolution. When there is conflict, I tend to avoid it unless it just really matters so much that I have to face it. So we've got unmet expectations, poor conflict resolution, lack of trust and respect, which is just absolutely foundational to those safe conversations. And then the last one, it really is all encompassing. It's just simply poor communication. Not being careful enough with our words to say exactly what we mean and to have good intentions behind it. So I'm wondering if one of those resonates with you more than the others.
Well, I think something that's resonating from what you said about your friend who processes fast and he doesn't, I think that goes hand in hand with the assumptions. And so for me, I guess it would be poor communication.
Okay.
Like, I assume, especially if I'm like this with somebody most of the time, like we're on the same page, et cetera, that we're on the same page. And so then I start making assumptions if we're not about what that is. And you can communicate about that. Hey, I'm making this assumption. Is this true? You know? And so, and then I keep moving. I'm fast too. I process really fast. And so I keep moving, and then I'm operating based on that. I don't realize it, but that assumption is sort of at the base of all of this. So it's for me to slow down and get curious and to actually realize that people do process really, really differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Every once in a while, Kathryn and family, we'll have a daily huddle that is internally enlightening for me. And this is one of those days. Like I think part of the learning from this is stopping and really considering how we are in relationship, when we're at our best and when we're not, and why that might be. And without the daily huddle in this conversation, I don't think that I would have stopped to see how often, as much as I preach it, how often I still am making assumptions, which actually is one of the 4 things that this couple teaches is to get over these hurdles, is to stop making assumptions. So I think I have dusted off I don't like the word New Year's resolution, but a new intention in 2024 is to continue to strengthen that muscle. You know, what am I assuming to be true? And why am I taking it personally?
I love that. I'm not big on the resolutions either, or word of the year, but one of the things that I'm focusing on, which is a word for 2024, is connection. And as I've thought about that being a real intention of mine for this year, I've thought about just what you're saying, not just like calling somebody, not reaching out once a day, you know, but like real deep, like what are the hurdles in the way of the connection that I'm really seeking?
Yeah.
And how can I put myself forth to be a better person in this relationship, even if I don't want to, or even if I'm feeling surly, you know?
You know, I have to remind myself that what you're talking about takes an investment of time. And here's what I have to remind myself, because my first hesitation is, oh, I know how beautiful it is to connect with people that I trust and respect and really dust off that connection. But where do I find the time? The time is returned to us because it gives us a giant dose of serotonin, some oxytocin, which helps us to be more productive. So I am really probably saying this out loud to remind myself, but anybody else is like, wow, that just takes a lot of time. Damn right it does, and it will be returned to you.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I want to go to, there's a question in the chat from Tom about I want to address it. Can there be a healthy aspect to being competitive as a springboard to finding something light to shift off the negative focus? And I'm curious about that, Tom. The first thing that comes to mind is competitive with ourselves of how to grow. But now you're smiling, so I'm curious. Say more.
Well, I was thinking about that. I mean, it's a playful question, but listening to you describe, it all starts with awareness and knowing yourself, and then you go into, engaging with someone. But I think a lot of times when we're worn down, we don't have a resiliency. We find ourselves in the middle of an interaction with someone and then realize, oh, I'm off. And so then it's a question, well, how do I then shift off of that? How do I reset myself? Or, out of care and respect for the other person, like, how do you then just acknowledge, like, I'm not where I want to be right now. I'd like to, either reset or just come at this in a different direction. And so when you said competitive, I know you and I have played around with that word from time to time. It just made me think, well, maybe there's a way that you can acknowledge where you are and then just spring, into a better place.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good point. Humor is often, for me anyway, sometimes it's not found. That's my stretch. Some people use humor to deflect, I have to look for humor. And so I think sometimes when things are really tense like that, and you're right, I realize I'm the one who's off. And like you said, a lot of important things in there. Yeah, it's time to set a boundary. This is not the time for me to have it, but it is a place to be like, really vulnerable, can even be silly, like, wow, I feel like a total jerk right now. And I'm not going to tell you what I want to say to you, or, because I think you're right. Humor is a great tool. It's just like I said before, just know why you're using it. If that's your default, it may be to deflect. And that's probably maybe not what you want to do. If it's not your default, and this is really to lighten the mood and to get us to a better place, totally fine. But there isn't a hard and fast rule of any of this stuff that can say, oh, this happens, do this. It just doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, I would love a rule book.
I've learned that what you just said, the hard way in speaking engagements, because sometimes, and I think I've taken things to maybe a little bit too emotional of a level. And then I'll try to say something funny to lighten it. It doesn't land when people are right. I mean, you can't just snap somebody out of one really intense emotion into another. And so I've learned that that's not how we're made. Yeah. Because I think I was deflecting my own conversation.
Right. Yeah. And then you have to experience, like, where are people in this? And I think that it's a real skill too. If you're in a really intense emotional conversation with somebody and you try and yank them out you have to read the room and say, I wonder if they're going to go with me there. Is that because it can go either way, they could just be like, great, there you go again, like, yeah. I'm pouring my heart out and here you go, making a joke about it. So I think a lot of it's emotional intelligence and reading the room.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a really good friend who tends to do that, but I know her so well. We have another question on the chat, and it's from Florence, and it says, what if we are not really meant to be in a long-term relationship with some individual? And
she followed it up too, Tara, with how do we determine when to exit or when to persevere?
Yeah, this might not apply to what you're facing, but what I do in my free time a lot of times is research, because that's what I love to do. And just recently, and I cannot cite this study, but I read something, this was just over the holidays, that said that when families break up, I think it contributes to 10 or 15% of young people's mental health issues. But when they stay together in conflict, it is way worse. So I wouldn't dare answer that question. I don't think I have the credentials, but I think that I think that we, maybe more women than men, tend to sacrifice ourselves, that we think that we're doing the right thing by just keeping that commitment and keeping that relationship. I just can say for me personally that I'd love to hear from you. I don't think that serves anyone well. Not even the person who thinks that they want to stay in it. If there is no way to strengthen and make a relationship true, we are denying not only ourselves, but everybody else in our lives that matters, the very best version of ourselves.
Yeah. And before we get to Sorrel, I think the only thing I would say, and I don't know why this keeps coming up so strongly to me today, is looking at you as a person, whoever I am, in whatever relationship I need to evaluate, what are my default tendencies? And am I doing that? You know, do I tend to stay and stick it out and do the hard thing, you know, or do I tend to run and get out of here quickly? And am I doing one of those? And yeah, cannot, you know, I think that drives so much of us. And as long as we're aware of it, doesn't mean that we make a different decision. We might make the same choice, but we make it from an intentional place instead of a default knee jerk. And there I go again, because that's what we don't learn.
So smart. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorrel.
Good morning and Happy New Year to all of you. Tara and Kathryn, thank you for this. I just wanted to share what's coming up for me in terms of, you know, you said you don't want to make a resolution, but you're making an intention. I think I'm feeling
Romantic.
it. So the thought that's there for me is that maybe I'm never in a relationship with another human being. Maybe I'm always in a relationship with my view or my interpretation of the human beings in my life. So I love what the person you mentioned, the couple, talked about unmet expectations and assumptions in general. So I keep looking for myself, and I'm seeing that in all of my relationships, there's this view, whether it's an ideal view or whatever view it is, of my mother, my father, you, Giovanni, and all. I'm in relationship with that interpretation. And maybe when I'm in conflict, maybe when I'm happy, it's whatever that version of how I'm seeing others that's feeding that. So in a way, what I'm discovering is that maybe the key to being in long-lasting relationships or ending relationships that I'm having difficulty ending is to really look, like you're saying, Tara and Kathryn, really look over here. And I'm not looking for the reasons or the spaces where I'm right or wrong, but I'm looking for that version of you that I'm in a relationship with in function of my interpretation. And if I can say to myself that, well, I'm responsible for that version of you, I made it up anyway, maybe I could make up another. And that's how I get into a relationship that I'm creating, because I'm responsible that I'm making you up anyway. So I'm saying it all wrong, but that's what's coming up for me, and I wanted to share that.
That's pretty heavy and deep, and a really powerful reminder. I don't think you're saying it wrong. I mean, we're all coming into relationships based on every life experience that led us up to that point. And we can't dismiss that. I tried to, and then I went to therapy and I was like, damn it. Gino, good morning.
Good morning. Happy New Year. I want to continue saying it all wrong. And continue piling up the same things wrong. And I'll fix it later, maybe. What's been coming up for me is a reflection I've had lately. Like, one of the biggest breakthroughs of my life has happened not long ago. And it has been around how wrong I've been about the people I have judged for years. I have hold a view about people who are close to my life, who I have hold a view of hurting me. And now in this becoming an adult, if you will, and I'm not sure if I ever want to be too much of an adult, but in this becoming of an adult and being someone responsible for my interpretations, I've discovered I was able to see them. I was able to see their struggles, what they were dealing with, and therefore, in some degree, how I was a really collateral damage, an accident of their struggles, of their humanity. And I'm referring to my family and their personal struggles. And I have this deep compassion for them. And I no longer hold this view of they hurt me for the things that they did. I now have this huge compassion. And so what I am sort of saying here today is I think that absent of my growing up, I would continue as an adult. I would continue to hold a view with rules and borders about them. And now that I have grown up as an adult, the last time I saw these individuals, I felt so much love for them. And there was a genuine hug. And like I was hugging their humanity, and it impacted me for sure. So in many ways, I'm trying to kind of build on what Sorel is saying. It kind of triggered that is the relationships I have with people in many ways are the relationships I have with my capacity to be with people. It's not them. And that's what I wanted to add to this mess, this soup of conversation.
I love that. That's a whole nother conversation, really. Like your capacity, what you bring to a relationship versus the others. Kathryn, I have dust in my throat. Talk.
Well, I think what I hear both Sorel and Gio saying is, how the depth to which we love and accept ourselves is the depth to which we can be in relationship with others. And if we're having a conflict with someone else, it's like we're having a conflict with ourselves. If we're angry at someone else, we're really angry with ourselves about something. And to look there is such a brave and courageous place to go.
Oh, what a beautiful reminder. You summarized those conversations so well. Thank you. Thank you. I think we are over time. It's time to close us out. I want to remind you all again that health, wellness, and vitality will now be on Wednesdays, and communication and relationships with Tara and Kathryn will be on Tuesdays. And we are so grateful for this Daily Huddle family. We are going to close out with our tenets, which begins with a spirit of love. Let's walk into 2024 leading with a spirit of love. And the spirit of generosity. Remember to give from your heart, your time, your talents. And like Tom says, there's a time to laugh. Throw that head back and let those endorphins in. And let's take care of our bodies. Let's stress less. Let's get that 7-8 hours of sleep. Let's eat as many plants as we can. And let's make sure that we are active and moving that body each and every day. We'll see y'all next time on the Daily Huddle.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you, ladies.
Family.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies.
Happy New Year, Tom.
Thank you.